It wasn't love at first sight. Not exactly. But it was something. Something Ezra couldn't name as he stood outside the university's crowded library, the drizzle beading on his jacket, his fingers half numb from carrying a cardboard tray with 4 steaming cups of coffee. The girl standing on the stairs wasn't anyone he recognized, and he'd worked long enough in the tech shop across campus to know most of the regulars. But this one, she was new, or maybe just always late. She looked like she'd missed something important. Her hair, black and curly, was clinging wetly to her cheeks. Her hoodie, gray, oversized, frayed around the cuffs, was soaked through. Her sneakers squeaked each time she shifted her weight, like her body wasn't sure whether to wait or leave. He stood there a beat too long. Then she glanced up and caught him staring, her brows knit together, mouth tightening like she was bracing herself for another minor disaster. Ezra took a step forward. "Long day?" he asked, lifting one of the coffees from his tray. She eyed the cup, hesitating, and for a moment he thought she'd brush past him with that quiet scorn unique to students under pressure. But instead, her lips parted. "I missed my bus," she said. "Twice, and I just found out I submitted the wrong version of my assignment." "Oof." He extended the cup. "Then I'd say this is destiny." "Or a setup," she muttered. But her hand closed around the cup anyway, fingers brushing his. Cold fingers, small. "I work at the tech shop," he said, gesturing vaguely across the street. "We have terrible coffee. I'm doing you a favor." That got a smile. Small, lopsided, unsure, but it lingered. "Liana," she said. "Ezra." And just like that, something shifted. Their second meeting and the first real spark. He wasn't expecting to see her again. Not really. She was a student. He was, well, he wasn't exactly faculty, but old enough to feel the gap. But the next afternoon, she walked into the tech shop, notebook in hand, and a shy smile barely tugging at her mouth. "I was wondering if you guys fix printers." "We hate fixing printers," Ezra said. "But for you, I might make an exception." She laughed. "Why do I get the feeling that line's been rehearsed?" "Because it has." She rolled her eyes, but passed him the notebook anyway, where a sheet of her assignment had printed half in Latin, half in gibberish. Ezra looked at it, then at her. "This printer is possessed." "I figured as much." He looked up at her then, really looked. Her hair was dry this time, tied up in a puff high on her head, earring small gold hoops that caught the afternoon light. Her hoodie had been replaced with a navy blue cardigan and fitted jeans, and though she still looked tired, there was something warm behind her exhaustion, an openness she hadn't shown before. "You free after this?" he asked, and then added too quickly, I can grab lunch. I'm technically on break." She tilted her head, studying him. "Do you always ask girls out over malfunctioning printers?" "Only the ones that look like they haven't eaten all day." She smiled again, broader this time. Real. Fast forward. The studio apartment. The studio wasn't much. Ezra had rented it after a freelance client paid a little more than expected. The place smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the neighbor's cigarette smoke. The walls were off-white, the floor laminate, and the bed was just a mattress on the floor. But she gasped when she saw it. "It's ours?" she whispered, spinning slowly in the middle of the room. "Ezra, it's beautiful." He laughed. "It's barely bigger than your dorm room." "Yeah, but this one doesn't come with 3 roommates and a shared toilet." She danced, across the tiny floor, barefoot, arms outstretched, spinning until she got dizzy and stumbled into his chest. He caught her, their eyes met, and then her mouth was on his, sweet and hungry. Her hands curled into the fabric of his t-shirt. He lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around him, the world narrowing to breath and touch and the soft thump of her heartbeat against his own. Full of pauses, whispers, the kind of aching vulnerability that only came when two people had nothing to prove and everything to lose. The good days, love in everyday moments. They made a game of leaving notes. Sometimes she'd slip them into his lunch bag. You forgot your tie again. But I love your neck. Sometimes he'd tape one to the mirror. Don't forget you're a goddess. Also, we're out of milk. They had Saturday morning rituals, pancakes, bad reality TV, and competing over who could do the worst celebrity impersonation. Once she snuck into his job during his lunch break, wearing a fake mustache and sunglasses, pretending to be a disgruntled customer demanding emotional compensation for a scratched phone screen. He laughed until his stomach hurt. They built a rhythm, not a fantasy. He bought groceries, she handled the laundry. He worked late some nights, and she curled up on the couch waiting for him, wrapped in his hoodie. She'd press kisses to the inside of his wrist when he looked too tired. He rubbed her back when she cried after finals. They talked about the future, maybe Thailand, maybe a dog, definitely a ring. Ezra even started a savings account called Liana's Forever Fund. He never told her about it. The beginning of the end, strange silences. The first time she didn't answer his call, he let it slide. The second time, she claimed she was in class. The third time, she texted back 6 hours later. Sorry, long night. Working on that finance capstone. But she didn't send a selfie. No voice note, not even a heart emoji. Ezra stared at the message, something cold crawling into his chest. Then came the perfume. Subtle at first, not her usual floral mist, but something more expensive, mature. It lingered on her skin, her hair, her clothes, and she'd started dressing differently. Silk blouses, gold necklaces, a sleek new bag he hadn't seen before. He didn't ask, not right away, because he trusted her, didn't he? Part 2. The breaking point. The silence between them wasn't sudden. It crept in slowly, threading through their conversations, quieting their laughter, muting the rhythm they had once moved to so naturally. It was the way Liana didn't hum while brushing her teeth anymore. The way she pulled away a little too quickly when Ezra hugged her from behind. The way her phone never left her hand, face down on the nightstand, vibrating with texts she never shared. He noticed everything, but said nothing. Because how do you accuse someone you love of slipping away when all you have are hunches and half-empty kisses? They were supposed to have dinner. He'd saved for 2 weeks to take her to a rooftop spot downtown. It wasn't flashy, but the view of the city skyline was spectacular. And the chef made truffle gnocchi she once claimed tasted like a creamy dream. Ezra waited for over an hour. She didn't show. He sat there at the table, fiddling with the condensation on his water glass, while couples laughed softly around him, candlelight dancing in their eyes. He checked his phone. Once, twice, 12 times. Nothing. No call, no excuse. Just silence. He paid the bill anyway. 2 entrees, 1 untouched. She came home after midnight. Ezra was on the couch, still in the dress shirt he'd ironed just for the evening, the collar slightly wilted now, his eyes rimmed with tired disbelief. Liana opened the door quietly, like a thief. "Where were you?" he asked, voice low, even. She didn't jump. She didn't flinch. She just sighed, like she'd been expecting this moment. "I was with some people from class," she said, slipping out of her heels. "It ran late." "Didn't think to text?" Her keys jingled as she set them on the counter. "I figured you'd be asleep." Ezra stood. His chest tightened, his voice thickening with all the words he wasn't ready to say. "I waited for you," he said. "I made a reservation. I even wore the stupid cologne you said made me smell like a rich uncle." Liana looked at him then, really looked, and something in her eyes faltered. Not guilt, not quite. Regret or pity. "Ezra," she began, but stopped herself. Her lips parted, then closed again. Her shoulders dropped. "Just tell me," he said. "Is there someone else?" The silence stretched and stretched. Finally, she nodded. It wasn't dramatic. No affair exploded, no shouting, no broken plates, just a nod. Quiet, precise, like a thread snapping inside him. Ezra sat down slowly, staring at the floor. "How long?" he asked. She hesitated. "A few weeks." "Is he a student?" "No," she said. "He's older. He owns a firm." Investment banking. Ezra let out a sharp laugh. But there was no humor in it, just disbelief curdling into bitterness. "Of course he does." He makes me feel secure," she said quietly, as if that explained everything. Ezra's hands clenched into fists on his knees. "I paid your rent, Liana. I kept you fed when you couldn't afford groceries. I bought you your goddamn textbooks. I didn't ask you to." She snapped, sudden heat flashing in her eyes. "You offered. Don't throw that in my face now." He looked up sharply. "I did it because I loved you." She didn't respond, didn't deny it, didn't say she loved him back. That, somehow, hurt more than the rest. The departure, she packed 2 suitcases, left the photos on the wall, the dried roses he'd taped to the mirror, the foot massage machine. Ezra didn't speak much as she zipped her bags. He just watched, numb, as she folded shirts he'd once nuzzled his face into, gathering them like evidence of something that had never really been hers. "You're not even sad," he said finally, voice quiet. She paused, hand resting on the suitcase lid. "I am," she replied, "but it's not the same kind of sad." He swallowed around the lump in his throat. "I was going to marry you." "I know." And that was it. She kissed him on the cheek, light, like a friend saying goodbye, and walked out the door. The click of the latch behind her felt final. Too final. The days that followed, grief without a funeral. Ezra didn't cry the first day, or the second. He just stopped moving. He sat in the same shirt for 48 hours, the one that still smelled faintly of her coconut shampoo. He scrolled through old texts until the screen blurred. He opened the fridge and found her leftover soup, still in the bowl with her name written in Sharpie on the lid. He didn't eat it. Couldn't. Everywhere he turned, she was there. In the blanket she always stole. The chipped mug she claimed made coffee taste better. The playlist she made for their road trip that never happened. When he finally cried, it came out of nowhere. He was brushing his teeth when he found one of her hair ties in the sink drawer, just a small black elastic. And suddenly, he was on the floor, sobbing into his knees, the toothbrush still foaming in his mouth. Nights without her. Sleep became a stranger. The bed felt too big, too cold. He tried listening to podcasts, tried sleeping with the TV on, tried lying on her side of the bed, hoping to inhale something of her. Nothing helped. He kept reaching for her in the dark, and waking up with fists full of air. The turning point. One morning, he found himself in front of the mirror, looking haggard. Sunken eyes, a beard too patchy to be romantic. His shirt smelled of sleep and sweat. He stared at himself for a long time. Then he grabbed the razor. The sound of it humming to life in his hand felt oddly final. He shaved, took a long shower, changed the sheets, put her stuff, though what little she left, into a box. He didn't throw it out, just stored it, high on a shelf, out of reach. Then he made himself a proper breakfast. The eggs were rubbery, the toast burned, but it was the first time he'd eaten sitting upright since she left. Part 3. The Golden Cage. From the outside, Liana's life looked immaculate. The apartment in the high-rise glimmered with imported marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. There was a private elevator, a housekeeper who came 3 times a week, and an espresso machine that cost more than the car Ezra used to drive. Her husband, Adrian, was a man people admired. He wore Italian suits, signed contracts with a flourish, and spoke in a low, calm voice that always seemed to carry authority. His money bought her everything Ezra never could: a new wardrobe, vacations to Santorini and Dubai, and access to a life she used to dream about when counting coins at the corner store near campus. They had 2 children within 4 years. A boy first, Daniel, and then a girl, Ava. Both had Adrian's striking features, but neither of them had his warmth, because there wasn't any. There never had been. And now, the silence in the penthouse echoed louder than a fight ever could. The quiet unraveling. Adrian came home later with each passing week. First, it was meetings. Then, it was business dinners. Then it was sheer exhaustion, a word he'd say while brushing past her like furniture. Even when he was home, his attention lived in his phone, his laptop, or in his chilled glass of bourbon. They hadn't made love in 8 months. Their last conversation that wasn't about bills, schools, or logistics had taken place sometime after Daniel's birthday. And even then, she couldn't recall what they'd said. Probably nothing that mattered. There was money. There was comfort. But there was no tenderness. No forehead kisses. No whispered jokes under shared covers. No random notes tucked into purses or mugs filled with coffee made just the way she liked it. She'd traded Ezra's world of simple, scrappy devotion for a palace with locked doors. And every day, the walls closed in more. The karma of memory. She tried not to think about Ezra. But it was like trying not to breathe. She would see a couple laughing in a grocery store, his hand in the small of her back, and Ezra's face would rise in her mind like a ghost. She'd remember how he used to whisper, "Don't buy that, it's overpriced. Come, I'll make you pasta the way you like it." And she'd giggle and follow, trusting. She remembered the smell of his hoodie, the warmth of his hands rubbing her feet during her late-night study marathons, the way he'd look at her like she was a secret only he was allowed to keep. It haunted her now, the way she left. No real goodbye, no proper ending. She had ripped out something that had been growing, softly, honestly, and replaced it with something polished and hollow. Was that what karma was? This ache in her chest that never truly left. Her friends envied her life. "You have it all, girl," they'd say. But she'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling while Adrian snored beside her, feeling like she had nothing. Cracks in the glass, the real breaking point came not with shouting, but in a whisper. One night, Adrian came home at 3:30 a.m., reeking of cologne that wasn't his. He didn't offer an explanation. It didn't look her in the eye. She waited until breakfast, watching him butter toast for Daniel, smile like nothing was wrong. When the kids left for school, she asked, voice steady, "Are you seeing someone else?" He didn't answer. Didn't need to. She packed a bag that night. Not for herself, for the kids. She moved into a modest apartment, nothing like the penthouse. It had peeling paint, a leaking faucet, and a couch that doubled as a bed. But it was hers, and the silence was different now. It wasn't cold. It was healing. The search for Ezra. Liana sat at the window on a rainy afternoon, Ava asleep on her lap. Daniel was drawing superheroes at the kitchen table, tongue sticking out in concentration. She stared at the mist crawling down the glass, her reflection blurred and distant. "I have to find him," she whispered. Not because she wanted him to fix her, not because she expected anything, but because he deserved an apology. And because somewhere deep inside, in the part of her that still remembered how he looked the night she walked away, devastated and silent, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she could still salvage something, even if it was only a few words exchanged in a coffee shop. She opened her laptop, searched his name. Nothing came up right away. No social media, no photos, just a few mentions on old tech blogs. She tried again, narrowed the search, changed keywords. Then, finally, on a freelance platform, she found a profile. Ezra Thomas, web designer, mid-level, bossed in the city, still using the same username he used in college. Her hand trembled as she hovered over the Contact Me button. She clicked, typed, deleted, typed again. "Liana, hi Ezra. I don't know if you'll ever read this, or if you even want to, but I owe you something. I owe you more than just a hello or a sorry. I owe you the truth about why I left, and maybe just a chance to sit across from you again and say the things I couldn't say back then. I hope you're happy. I hope you found someone who loves you the way you deserve. But if you ever feel like it, I'd love to meet. Just once. Coffee. No pressure. Just two old ghosts catching up," but she stared at it. Then hit send and leaned back in her chair, exhaling like she hadn't in years. Part 4. The Second Shadow. The cafe was quiet, tucked into the corner of a narrow street where the foot traffic slowed and time seemed to move a little differently. Ezra had chosen it out of habit more than preference. A place where he could sit near the window, sip his espresso slowly, and not be noticed. The bell over the door chimed. He didn't look up at first. He was too preoccupied with the message on his phone, the one that had arrived 2 nights earlier, like a voice from a past life. Liana. Just the sight of her name had shaken him, like a sudden gust of wind against a door long since locked. He hadn't responded yet. Couldn't. Not because he was angry, but because he didn't know how to feel, how to reopen that part of himself. He took another sip of coffee, letting it scald his tongue. Then he heard her voice. "Ezra?" It wasn't Liana, but for a moment his breath hitched. He looked up, and it was like seeing Liana's face through a glass slightly tilted to the left. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same soft cheekbones, almond-shaped eyes, and those full lips that curled up just slightly when she smiled. But there were differences, too. Her hair was longer, straighter, jet black and glossy. Her style was bolder, gold hoops, a fitted leather jacket over a mocha-colored dress. She carried herself with the kind of confidence Liana had never quite grown into. "Naomi?" Ezra said slowly, standing halfway. She smiled, slipping her purse over the back of the chair opposite him. "I wasn't sure you'd recognize me," she said, sitting down. It's been, what, 6 years? Something like that, he said, still stunned. Last time I saw you, you were wearing braces and quoting Disney songs? She finished with a smirk. Yeah. I remember, Ezra chuckled. But there was a wariness in his posture. He couldn't help it. The air had shifted the moment she walked in. You look... He searched for a word that wouldn't come off strange. You've grown up. I've glowed up, Naomi corrected, flicking her hair over one shoulder. Come on, say it. He laughed, more genuinely this time. You've glowed up. She tilted her chin, pretending to inspect her nails. Damn right I have. The waitress came and took her order. Iced oat milk latte, no sugar. Ezra noted it absent-mindedly. Liana always hated iced drinks. So, he said, watching her settle in, what brings you here? I'm guessing this isn't a coincidence. Naomi's smile faltered, just slightly. She folded her hands in front of her and leaned in. Liana told me she wrote you. Ezra's face closed like a shutter. He looked down into his coffee. The last sip had gone cold. I haven't replied. I figured. A pause stretched between them, comfortable only on her side. Listen, she said gently. I'm not here to guilt you into anything. I wanted to see you. I heard you're still in the city. I was curious. He looked up again, studying her more closely. She wasn't a girl anymore. And that curious light in her eyes. It wasn't childlike awe. It was something more measured, mature, intrigued. Curious about what? He asked carefully. About how you turned out after my sister broke your heart. Ezra exhaled slowly. The breath caught somewhere in his chest. Worse than I thought I would, he said honestly. But better than I deserved. Naomi tilted her head, lips pursing. That's not true. He raised an eyebrow. How would you know? Because I saw how you loved her, she said softly. I saw it even when I was too young to understand it. Ezra didn't respond. The ache stirred, old and familiar, but dulled by time. Naomi reached across the table, brushing her fingers along the rim of his empty cup. You were always the one, she murmured. We all knew it. Ezra's breath hitched again. But this time, it wasn't because of pain. There was something in the way she said it. Something not entirely innocent. Something dangerous. A familiar flame, a new heat. The resemblance was uncanny. But it wasn't just looks. It was the way she laughed, low and knowing, like she was letting him in on a secret. The way she leaned in when she spoke, fingers absently brushing her necklace. The confidence. The sparkle in her eyes that wasn't naivety, but sharp, deliberate curiosity. He had known Naomi as a teenager, Liana's bratty little sister who played pop music too loud, and once left sticky notes on his laptop that said, Liana likes you, but she's shy. But this woman, she was something else. Something dangerous. Something magnetic. And the worst part? He felt it. Felt it deep in his chest. The way her presence stirred him. Not as a replacement, not as a ghost, as herself. And that realization made him sit straighter, trying to clear the fog in his head. This feels weird, he admitted. Naomi smirked. Because you're not sure if I'm her or not her? He hesitated. She leaned back, sipping her latte. Relax. I know the resemblance is a bit uncanny. Trust me, I've heard it my whole life. But I'm not Liana, I know, he said quietly. But I was watching, she added. Back then, when she cried on the bathroom floor, telling me she didn't know if she deserved your love. And when she left, you should have seen her the next morning. She smiled like she'd won the world. But every time your name came up, she flinched. Ezra's throat tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because, Naomi said, setting her cup down and locking eyes with him. I think you deserve someone who doesn't flinch. His eyes searched hers. Silence bloomed. And then, unexpectedly, Ezra smiled. Not out of joy, not out of flirtation, but relief. Because for the first time in years, he felt seen, not as Liana's past, but as a man who still had a future. Part 5. What She Didn't Say. Naomi didn't tell Liana about the coffee meeting right away. When her sister called, hopeful, breathless, Naomi simply said, "Yes, I saw him. He's doing well. Still kind. Still calm." And then, carefully, deliberately, he asked if I could give you his new number. It wasn't a lie. Ezra had asked. Not directly. But his silence after Naomi's question had held the weight of consent, or something like it. So she gave Liana the number, along with a simple warning. Don't rush him. Just be honest if you reach out. There was a pause, and then Liana's soft, nearly broken reply. I will. I just want a chance. But Naomi didn't mention the way Ezra had looked at her across the cafe table. She didn't tell Liana that he had laughed, a real, unforced laugh, for the first time in a long time. She certainly didn't admit how much that laugh had made her stomach flutter in the ways she hadn't expected. Because she hadn't planned this. But she also didn't plan on walking away. A new beginning in the shadows. The second time she met Ezra, it was under the pretense of a thank you. I figured I owed you lunch, she'd texted him casually. You gave me the most unexpectedly deep coffee shop therapy session. He replied with a time and place. No emojis, no exclamation marks. But he showed up. And then it happened again and again. Once a week, then twice. Then it wasn't planned at all. They simply found themselves gravitating toward each other with an ease that made the past feel strangely irrelevant. They never spoke about Liana. Not directly. Not even when her message finally arrived on Ezra's phone. Simple, direct, a single line. Can we meet, please? He didn't reply. And Naomi didn't ask him why. But she saw it in his eyes. He wasn't avoiding Liana. He just didn't need her anymore. The first touch, they were walking home from a late dinner. One of those warm summer nights where the air smelled faintly of honeysuckle, and the city glowed soft and gold under the streetlights. Ezra had said something dry and clever. She didn't even remember what it was, and Naomi had laughed, full and real, her head tilted back, eyes crinkling. Then, without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm. It was casual. But when she didn't pull away, he didn't either. The contact lingered, his skin warm under her fingertips, his eyes catching hers for a beat longer than they should have. And something in the space between them clicked. She didn't kiss him, not yet. But in that long pause, that suspended breath before they both looked away, Naomi knew. And so did he. Liana waits. Meanwhile, Liana sat on her small apartment balcony, phone in her hand, staring at the last message she'd sent. 3 days ago. Can we meet, please? Read, but no reply. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Maybe she'd follow up. Maybe she'd send a voice note. Something soft, vulnerable. But she didn't. Because deep down, in the pit of her stomach, she felt it. Ezra had changed. No, not changed. He had grown. And maybe he was finding peace that didn't include her. She wouldn't say it aloud, but a cold ache had begun forming in her chest. A fear she hadn't anticipated. What if he forgave me, but didn't want me? What if he'd moved on, Worse, what if he'd moved on with someone I know? The hidden romance. By the fourth time Naomi came over to Ezra's place, it didn't feel strange anymore. She kicked off her shoes at the door like she belonged there. She brought her own tea, her own snacks. She teased him about his taste in vinyl records and insisted he let her reorganize his spice rack. He let her. One evening, after a long, slow conversation about absolutely nothing, she sat curled up on his couch with a book in her lap, and he looked at her, really looked. Not as Liana's sister, not as a reflection, but as someone fully herself. Naomi. Smart, bold, thoughtful in a way that didn't scream for attention. And when she caught him watching her, her smile didn't fade. She didn't shy away. She simply said, "What?" And he said, "You feel like peace?" It wasn't a line. It wasn't even intentional. But her breath hitched. And then, for the first time, their lips met. No fireworks, no cinematic music, just quiet. Sure, soft and unmistakably right. Guilt, compartmentalized, still, Naomi wrestled with herself. At night, when she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above her, she thought of Liana, of how much her sister had changed, of the hurt in her voice when she asked again, "Do you think Ezra hates me?" Naomi had said no, and she believed it. But she also didn't say what she was becoming in Ezra's life. She didn't say that she now knew how he took his coffee, how he folded his towels a specific way, or how he liked his back scratched lightly when he couldn't sleep. She didn't say how he kissed her, not hungrily, but carefully, like he didn't want to break whatever they were building between them. She told herself she'd explain. Eventually, when it was solid, when it wasn't just chemistry, when it became something that could stand on its own. Because if she told Liana now, too early, it would burn everything down. Ezra's inner conflict. Ezra wasn't blind. He knew the danger in what they were doing. But he also knew this. He hadn't chased Naomi. She had found him. And more importantly, she had seen him. Not as someone broken or as Liana's leftover chapters, but as someone worth knowing again. From scratch. But there were moments, quiet ones, when he'd wake up to the sound of Naomi breathing softly beside him, and a twinge of something pulled at his chest. Guilt, maybe? Or maybe it was just memory refusing to be buried. Still, he didn't reach out to Liana, not even once. Not even when she finally sent him one last message. "I understand. Whatever happens, I hope you're truly happy." He didn't respond, but he did stare at it for a long time. Until Naomi stirred in bed beside him, one arm draping across his chest, her warmth anchoring him to now. He closed the message, slid the phone under the pillow, and wrapped his arms around the woman beside him. Part 6. Secrets in the Light. It happened quietly, without an audience, without spectacle. Ezra proposed on a rainy Thursday afternoon. They were in his apartment, barefoot in the kitchen, Naomi standing on her tiptoes to reach the top shelf. She wore one of his old t-shirts, no makeup, hair piled into a messy knot. The radio played softly in the background, a jazz saxophone curling around them like smoke. He hadn't planned it. He simply turned, saw her like that, unguarded, laughing softly to herself. And something ancient inside him shifted. His heart moved before his mind could interrupt. "Naomi," he said, the name catching in his throat like a prayer. She looked down at him from the stool, tilting her head. And Ezra, voice steady, eyes clear, reached into the drawer behind him. Not for a ring, not yet, just a folded napkin. He scribbled a question with the closest pen, his handwriting a hurried scrawl. "Will you be mine, officially?" He held it up. Naomi stared at it and then stared at him. She laughed, once, bright and stunned, then blinked. "You're serious?" she whispered. He nodded. Her mouth trembled into a grin. "God, you're ridiculous." "Is that a yes?" Her eyes softened. "That's a hell yes." He slipped a simple silver band onto her finger, a stand-in, until they could choose something together. She kissed him, tears blurring the edges of her lashes. The unraveling. It took 2 days for Liana to find out. Not from Ezra, not from Naomi, but from a mutual friend who'd seen Naomi's hand, ringed and glowing, at a bookshop near the university. "She looked radiant," the friend had said. "I didn't know she was seeing anyone serious." Liana had smiled weakly. Neither did I. That night, her chest cracked open like a fault line, and everything she had tried to accept, to bury, came rushing back with venom. Ezra, Naomi, together, her younger sister, the one who used to borrow her clothes, the one she once whispered to about her first kiss with Ezra, cheeks flushed and eyes starry. The betrayal wasn't even in what they had. It was in what they hid. The 100 calls. Ezra's phone began buzzing around 11:13 p.m. He was in bed, Naomi curled beside him, her breathing slow and steady. The screen lit up Liana calling. He didn't answer, not out of cruelty. He simply didn't know what to say. He watched the screen fade, then buzz again, and again. By the time dawn broke, he had 102 missed calls from Liana, and a single message. "Please, Ezra, I need to understand. You owe me that much." He sat on the edge of the bed, phone clutched tight in his hand, staring out the window at a city that felt suddenly too loud, too sharp. He didn't reply. Naomi's turmoil. Naomi felt it the moment she woke. Not the phone calls. Ezra hadn't told her. But something had shifted in the air. He held her tighter that morning, kissed her longer. But behind his eyes, something was flickering. He was bracing. And Naomi knew, Liana knew. The guilt she'd kept neatly folded and tucked away began to unravel. She sat at the kitchen table, untouched coffee cooling between her palms, heart twisting with a contradiction she couldn't name. I love him. But she loved him first. She lost him. But she gave him away. I didn't steal anything, but I didn't tell her either. Liana's desperation. She didn't cry, not at first. She went through the day like a ghost, packing the kids' lunches, signing permission slips, checking email. But her hands shook. Her skin felt too tight. Her breath caught in her throat whenever she passed a mirror. By evening, she cracked. The apartment was too quiet. The silence, once soothing, now rang like punishment. She sat on the couch, phone pressed to her chest. Why didn't he tell me? She thought back to that message she'd sent, the one he'd read and never responded to. Whatever happens, I hope you're truly happy. She meant it then, but now that she knew what happy looked like, Naomi wearing her ring, her heart twisted with something she couldn't name. Jealousy, regret, loss, all of it, all at once. And beneath it all, something worse. I deserve this. The thought came, unbidden. She had left Ezra. She had chosen status over sincerity, comfort over connection. And Naomi had simply walked into the space she'd abandoned. But the grief was no less real, because knowing it was fair didn't make it hurt any less. Ezra's silence. He didn't respond to the message, not because he didn't feel the weight of her words, but because there was no version of a reply that wouldn't make things worse. He tried writing one, several in fact. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. This wasn't planned. But it's real. I didn't mean to hurt you. He deleted them all, because the truth was, he had hurt her, even if she had hurt him first. And Naomi, God, Naomi, she didn't deserve to be caught between them like this. So Ezra made a choice. He turned the phone off, folded the ache into a small, silent place inside himself, and turned back to the woman who had healed him without ever asking for anything in return. Part 7. The confrontation. The knock on the door came on a windless evening, as the last golden smear of sun slipped behind the city's crooked skyline. Naomi had just returned from a yoga class, still in leggings and a cropped sweatshirt, her hair damp from a quick shower. She moved through Ezra's apartment with ease now, flipping lights on, stacking dishes in the sink, feeding the cat a small scoop of kibble while humming to herself. She didn't expect company, so when the knock came again, louder this time, urgent, she frowned, her fingers hovering midair above the sink. And then she heard the voice. Naomi. It's me. Her blood turned cold. She walked to the door slowly, her heart beating in her ears, feet suddenly too heavy. When she opened it, Liana stood in the hallway, jacket clutched tight around her, eyes wild and bloodshot, as if she hadn't slept in days. There were no greetings. Just a long, breathless silence. And then Liana whispered, You didn't tell me. Naomi didn't try to lie. No, I didn't. Liana stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Her gaze scanned the room with barely disguised recognition. The framed print on the wall, Ezra's laptop charging by the sofa, the folded blanket Naomi had draped over the armrest that morning, the faint, warm scent of him still hanging in the air. This is his place, Liana said, more to herself than to Naomi. You're living here? Naomi shut the door gently. Liana, when were you going to tell me? Her voice cracked. When I saw wedding photos on Instagram? I didn't plan this, Naomi said softly. We didn't plan this? It just happened. Liana let out a humorless laugh. That's what people say when they sleep with someone else's past. Naomi's jaw tightened. He's not yours anymore. The words hovered between them, sharp and unforgiving. Liana flinched, physically, and then looked away, blinking fast. Her fingers twisted the hem of her jacket, her shoulders pulling inward. I reached out to him, she said. I sent him messages. I waited for weeks, I know, Naomi whispered. Liana turned to her sharply. You knew? Naomi's mouth parted, but she couldn't speak. I was hoping for closure, Liana continued, her voice thinner now, like glass about to splinter, or, I don't know, maybe forgiveness, a conversation, something. And all this time, you were... Her throat caught. You were with him? Naomi didn't deny it. Couldn't. Yes, she said finally. I was. Liana sat down, like her legs could no longer hold her. Naomi watched her sister curl into herself on Ezra's couch, shoulders trembling, fists clenched. And for the first time in her life, she didn't know what to say. I keep thinking, Liana said, staring at nothing, that this is karma. For the way I left him, for how cold I was, I thought I could have it all. Trade up, find something better. She closed her eyes. But all I did was walk away from the only person who ever really loved me. Naomi sank into the chair opposite her. You did what you thought was right at the time. Liana opened her eyes. No, I did what was easy. A silence settled between them, heavy, raw. You love him? Liana asked suddenly. Naomi didn't look away. Yes. Her sister didn't cry. Not properly. But her eyes shimmered. Tired, red-rimmed, full of everything she hadn't said for years. I thought we'd at least have a conversation, Liana murmured. Even if he hated me. even if he just wanted to say goodbye. He didn't hate you, Naomi said. He just didn't want to reopen the wound. Liana gave a small, bitter smile. Then I guess I did that for him. Naomi swallowed hard. You think I betrayed you? I think... Liana hesitated. I think I was selfish. And so were you. But maybe that's just what happens when we all want the same heart. Later that night, Ezra comes home. When Ezra returned around 10 p.m., keys jingling in the door. He stepped into the apartment and froze. Naomi was sitting at the window, curled in the armchair, face pale and unreadable. Ezra noticed the slight puffiness around her eyes, her hands clenched together in her lap, her silence. He looked around. Liana was here, he said quietly. Naomi nodded once. Ezra let out a breath. How did it go? I didn't lie, she said. Good. But I didn't tell her we're engaged. He stepped toward her. Why? Naomi looked up at him. Because I didn't want to break her twice in one day. Ezra sat beside her, took her hand. It was cold. She had a right to know, Naomi whispered. Not just about us, but about the silence. She needed to hear it from you. Ezra nodded slowly. I know. But you didn't call her back. I couldn't, he admitted. I didn't have the words. Or maybe I didn't want to say the wrong thing. Or say anything at all. He looked at her, searching. I love you, Naomi. But part of me will always remember what it felt like to be left behind. Naomi rested her forehead against his. And now you're afraid you're doing the same thing. Yes. She kissed him softly. You're not. You chose me, I did. But she'll always be part of your story. Ezra didn't respond, because that was true too. Somewhere across the city, Liana sat in her apartment, kids asleep, the street lamp outside flickering like a fading heartbeat. She stared at the message screen one last time. No reply. She finally typed, You don't owe me anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For all of it. I hope she makes you happy. She hit send. Then turned the phone off and cried for the man she didn't lose to another woman. But to the past, she never tried to heal until it was far too late.